Yeah, the police are after me again for a crime I don't even believe in. Yeah, the police are after me again. Yeah, the police are after me again for a crime I don't even believe in. Yeah, the police are after me, my friend. The police are after me, she said. Yeah, they held their gun to my head. Somehow I ducked, escaped, and fled the scene. Well, they already ran my ID. Yeah, they already ran my ID. They pulled me off the train in the Portland rain. Mid-November ain't the warmest ride, and the crater ain't the best place to hide, especially when you're riding suicide. Especially when you're riding suicide. Yeah, the police are after me again for a crime I don't even believe in. Yeah, the police are after me again. Yeah, the police are after me again for a crime I don't even believe in. Yeah, the police are after me, my friend. So I got back on when they were gone on the flagged old gondola. Then I smoked the resin in my bunk, cause the police didn't find it. Woke up in a mountain range, woke to a cold, wet, lonesome pain. And then the time it came to get the fuck off the train, because the police are after me again for a crime I don't even believe in. Yeah, the police are after me again. Yeah, the police are after me, my friend, for a crime I don't even believe in. Yeah, the police are after me again. She said the police are after me for being dirty, trespassing. They hate me cause I ain't clean, but I think they're the ones who are dirty.
Alright, we're doing this and we are live. Hey everyone, welcome to the Garret Schuelke podcast. I am the host, Garret Schuelke. You probably figured that out by now with all these episodes and the name of the podcast. Yeah, hi folks. This is a special episode of the podcast today. We're broadcasting from Hall Street Bakery here in Grand Rapids. So, yeah, very first time being here in my home of 6 years. And we have a special guest today. He is the author of Legion of Nothing, which is made up of 2 books and a web serial. He is a contributor to the Good Fight anthology series. And he's a member of the Pen Cape Society, which last time I checked, you're technically the president of, right?
Yeah, I guess I am. I probably need to be a little bit more active. Really, as a group, we kind of need to be a little bit more active.
We will get into that, actually. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome. And I actually found your YouTube account when I was looking up.
I saw that.
So, you noticed my subscription.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I believe I will say your last name right. Jim Zoeteway.
Zoeteway. Yeah.
Zoeteway. Damn.
Well, that's a whole lot closer than an awful lot of the time. When I was in high school, basically what would happen is that I would be I was on the swim team, and they would announce my name, and I would know that it was going to be Bean by the long pause, as they said, okay, so and so on block whatever. It's like, oh, okay, Jim Zoeteway, or who knows, Zoeteway, or...
Yeah, that's actually how I thought it was pronounced at first.
It's totally a legitimate mistake. I mean, it's just the whole thing is, it's a Dutch name, and it's spelled partially like a Dutch name, because my actual relatives in the Netherlands spell it Zoetewij, which is one step weirder and would have been pretty entertaining, actually, if we'd kept the original spelling.
Mine's, depending on your interpretation, either German or Polish. Mm-hmm. However I feel, pretty much. I've gotten Schuelke, Schultz, mostly from, people that call you up and want to sell you stuff.
Right.
That's how you knew right away that was the same person. So welcome to the podcast, Jim. Thanks for coming on. And another reason why this is a special podcast, besides being here in Grand Rapids for the first time, I mostly record out of Kalamazoo at Zach Elmblad's studio, or up in my hometown of Alpena at the Alpena Public Library. You see, the description of my podcast is that I interview friends, acquaintances, and favorite people. You, sir, would fall under the favorite people category.
Okay.
Since this is my first time meeting you, aside from online.
Huh.
Yep, I would. Yeah, and you're one of my favorite people because you write superhero fiction, and I write superhero fiction.
Mm-hmm.
And we could get more into the genre later on in the podcast, but you're one of the first people that I found when I really started researching it, trying to find places to submit. And much to my surprise, you're based here in Grand Rapids as well.
Yeah,
Lucky me.
That's one of those things that is just largely unintentional in the sense that I grew up in Holland, Michigan. I studied a number of things, actually, and in the end, I'm in IT. And as a result of that, basically I can be located anywhere where there are computers, which in the U.S. is pretty much anywhere. And my wife comes from Grand Rapids, more or less. I mean, technically Wyoming, Michigan. And so I get the feeling that I got the feeling that she probably didn't want to do what I wanted to do, which was go get a doctorate and be a prof and do the, shall we say, the endless cycle of going from college to university to whatever until you find one that gives you tenure. You know, and honestly, I was not completely sure that I wanted to do that either, because, I mean, my dad taught at Hope College. He taught political science.
Actually, let's get into that. All right, you mentioned that you're from Holland. Yeah, when were you born?
In 1969. So basically,
Good year.
Yeah, well, it's the year that the year people landed on the moon, oddly enough. So that was later that summer.
If they actually landed on it.
Oh man.
We're not going to get into conspiracy theories. That's me and Zach on the last thing. But, okay, yeah, you grew up in Holland. So how was your childhood, sir?
I mean, I enjoyed it. You know, it's one of those things where, again, my dad was a college professor at Hope College. So the result of that is that because he originally came from Colorado, we would most summers end up going to Colorado for maybe a couple weeks or something to visit relatives and then come home. Also, it meant that occasionally he would end up having an NEH grant, which is a National Endowment for the Humanities, which would more or less pay for him, and him only, to go study at some university somewhere in the United States. But sometimes the rest of the family ended up coming along. And usually when he had those, we would at the very least end up going and picking him up at the end and going somewhere after that. Usually Colorado, but not necessarily. So it was one of those things where, I mean, you know, it's like Hope College was a constant presence because my dad taught there. And as a result of him getting NEH grants and a certain amount of travel for whatever reason, I've been in 40 out of the 50 states.
Ooh.
So
Very impressive.
not all of them for especially long, but
That was something.
yeah.
This come from a guy who I have traveled more this past decade, but I'm actually going on my first trip to London this summer.
Oh wow, that's cool.
Yeah, but yeah, compared to say yourself, haven't traveled as much as I wanted to.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one of those things where basically some of those places that I mentioned are not maybe as exciting as others. You know, it's one thing to go to the Rocky Mountains and go, wow, these are amazing places to go look at. But on the other hand, also, I spent at least 6 weeks living in Iowa City, Iowa.
Very exciting.
Yeah, there's a university there, and that's why I was there.
Honestly, there's only two things about Iowa that I know of. Hemingway spent his last days there, is buried in there. Ketchum, Idaho.
Yeah.
Wow, that is very embarrassing.
Yeah.
Okay, the one thing I do know about Iowa is new metal band Slipknot's from.
Okay, well,
There, fix that one.
my major association with Iowa, aside from the University of Iowa, is corn.
The food or the band?
Not the band. I mean, basically, if you go to Iowa, there's corn everywhere, including as decoration, actually, at one gas station. There was corn growing next to the gas station. Just presumably because someone was like, let's make this homey, or I don't know what the motivation is there.
Great location for to grow corn.
I mean, there's no way you're going to get enough to sell, you know. Yeah. But they did that anyway.
You gotta keep up an image.
Yeah, something like that. I mean, but the funny thing is, you know, someone I knew who actually went to Iowa and lived there because her father got a job there. I mean, she mentioned how basically you could get paid to detassel the corn. And that was a thing. A summer job you could have, detasseling corn. So, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's not a whole lot to say about Iowa other than the fact that that is someplace else in the Midwest that I have lived. On the other hand, I've also lived in Washington, D.C. for about 3 or 4 months.
All right, there you go.
Which is more interesting than Iowa City, Iowa. But Iowa City, Iowa was not that bad considering I was in 6th grade, liked reading a lot, and Iowa City, Iowa has a great library system.
Well, actually, I would hope any city has a great library system, but especially in a place like Iowa City, Iowa, yeah, especially so. But yeah, let's get talking to that since you're a writer. So, when did you start writing?
I don't really have a date, because here's the thing. I kind of have always been interested. And, you know, honestly, during much of school, it was largely school assignments. Except, I mean, I did take a creative writing class when I was I think maybe when I was a senior or junior in high school. And also, when I went to Hope College, it's hard not to when your dad's a professor, not because he in any way pushed us to do that, but he was grateful that we did that because Hope has free tuition for profs' kids. Because, you know, that's a whole lot better than paying.
Especially today.
Yeah, especially today. And so, I mean, basically, it's like, okay, I can go to a good school for no tuition, or a school just as good for full tuition. The choice is clear. So, yeah, so basically, I got the equivalent of a creative writing minor while at Hope. I say equivalent because I took a bunch of classes, and it didn't occur to me that it was enough for a minor until after I graduated. So, oddly enough, I also got the equivalent of an ancient civilizations minor in the process. But that's one of those deals where, I mean, in any case, I've always been interested in writing. But I was never really all that serious about doing it until probably I didn't start regularly writing until my 30s. About 2007. I mean, the thing is, I say that, but it's also worth noting that during my 20s, when I was in school, I was writing a novel that was very much based on the history of Holland, Michigan. And at some point, I'm going to end up revisiting that one, but I haven't yet. So, I mean, there were periods of years where I was writing at least 5 nights a week for at least an hour. So, I mean, and in addition to that, that was also true in graduate school, because I went to graduate school for sociology, and also went to seminary, actually, for a period of about 2 years.
Oh, really?
So, in addition to that, but yeah, I mean, basically, interest in science fiction and fantasy and comics and comic books specifically too.
Wow. Well, I could combine two questions then. What was your reading like growing up, and more specifically, when did you get into like comics, comic books, and superheroes?
Well, that's one of those hard to say things as well, because I'm old enough that the comic that I predate lots and lots of comic book stores. When I was a kid, there weren't comic book stores that I knew about. What there were those spinner racks that
you would get in like a 7-Eleven
or a
gas
pharmacy
station.
or something, and they just have like racks of comics in there, and you could go there, and or like at a convenience store. So there was actually a liquor store near my house that I obviously did never buy any alcohol from because I was 6 or 10 or something. But I did buy comics there.
You could have gave it a college try.
I don't think I would have passed for 21. Not at that age.
Yeah, I'm old enough to remember that, and I actually, it's not my first comic, because honestly, like, I would get gifts and bundles, Batman,
Right.
Superman, Archie. But I remember, like, the very first comic series I would care about, and it ended about 2 years ago, I believe, was Sonic the Hedgehog, the comic series that Archie put out. I remember getting the very first issue on a spin rack at the 7-Eleven in my hometown of Alpena.
Okay.
And I didn't know how to read it yet. I only recognized it because it's Sonic the Hedgehog, who
Right.
still to this day is one of my all-time favorite cartoon and video game characters.
Okay.
And of course, I would bug my mom to read it to me over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's the nature of kids.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that's one of those things where, I mean, for me, actually, some of the first comics I bought were not so much that as Star Wars comics. Because oddly enough,
Dark Horse.
no, Marvel predates that. This is 70s, back when, like, they didn't know even what the second movie was going to be like.
Oh, okay.
They were publishing, and actually, that publishing Marvel comics, which honestly no one expected, publishing Star Wars comics, which no one expected to be a big thing because they didn't expect Star Wars to be a big thing, was pretty much what saved Marvel in the 1970s, because they were not doing well at all at the time. And they published comic book novelizations of Empire Strikes Back and Star Wars, and they did a whole lot of like Star Wars with just straight out Star Wars comics that were, the standard 22 pages.
Yeah. Have you checked out any of the new Star Wars that Marvel puts out?
No. I mean, it's kind of funny. I haven't been reading many comics lately. I got back into it right around a few years ago, and then by combination of a few different things, one of them being I had some job-related difficulties, and
Oh boy,
we
can relate.
I was working for a company that was basically bleeding money, and actually gave everyone a temporary salary cut that was permanent until it was laid off. And at the point where you have like a several $1,000s salary cut for the year.
That's a good reason. That's a good reason to not buy comics.
It is an excellent one. It's also a great reason to cancel your cable subscription. I mean, that's one of those things where I was just like, well, what can I cut? But the thing is, I kept on reading Marvel comics even through that. I mean, I kind of ended up cutting out some of the DC ones. But the funny thing is,
as a DC fanboy, how dare you?
But the thing is, I mean, basically the most recent Marvel big events kind of made it. It's not that I hated them or anything. It was more or less along the lines of, I can't figure out where the next issue of the comics I like are.
My two big criticisms of Marvel is that they put out way too many number ones, which is an obvious ploy for sales. Like, they'll have like a 5-issue series and then back to number one with the same character. There's that. And then, of course, at least compared to DC, DC has a lot of specials too, but it's just special event after special event after special event.
Not
too
at
many.
present, actually.
Really?
After the big events that I was like, they had 2 in a row, and I was like, after the first one, I was like, okay, I think I can figure out where to pick up the comics that I care about again. Because the thing is, in their comics, they don't say, oh, if you care about this character, we're going to stop publishing his comic during this big event. By the way. And when at the end you can start picking it up again, or no, we're temporarily renaming the comic.
Yeah, or they interrupt the ongoing story with the special going on.
Right. See, after they did that the first time, I was like, okay, well, I just figured out where these things start up again. Cool. I'll start reading again. And then for the next one, I was like, I have no clue, where to start reading again. And that's too bad because at this point I can afford it again, and I actually would kind of like to go back to following certain characters, but
Well,
I haven't.
I do have a suggestion for you. I haven't picked up a physical comic in a couple of years now, and the reason for that is because I have this nice little app called Comixology.
Yeah, well,
Ever
and
heard of
that's what I was following everything on.
Oh, you
is
were?
the thing, and that's the problem, because in the physical, if you walk into a physical store, the owner will tell you, yeah, they stopped doing this. It's called this now, and go on with that. Fine, I'll go do that. If you're following it on Comixology and there's some big event, basically, if you want to find out where it is that your favorite comic went for the duration of the big event that will end all events except for the next one or 5, well, that comic, the only way you're only going to ever find it again is go through stuff online where you finally find out where people say, oh yeah, if you want to follow Miles Morales as Spider-Man, then now his comic is now called...
Yeah, Ultimate Spider-Man Miles Morales.
Right.
Something like that.
Yeah, or, well, except now, there is no Ultimate Universe. They killed that off. And
Wait, no. Somewhat, but then, I think it was Spider-Man 2. They showed that the Ultimate Universe is somehow back.
well, the thing is, though, Miles Morales is now in the main one, which technically is no longer 616. So, yeah, this is just one of those things. This is one of the things I like about writing. Writing books as opposed to following comics. The good thing about superhero fiction is that, as a general rule, it's written by one person. There is no big editor-in-chief who's going to say, guess what, we're going to change everything now. And as a result, you often have one story told from beginning to end, even if that end is, as per my series, 10 books in at this point.
It's still ongoing.
Yes.
Yeah, let's get into that. Specifically, how did you get into superhero fiction?
Oh, this is one of those wacky explanations. So, you know how you said, hey, when I started writing superhero fiction, here's one of the people I found, more or less to your surprise, that there was anyone to find.
Yeah. Well, actually, I started writing superhero fiction, specifically my Golden series, back in 2011. It wouldn't be until like 2014 when I first started trying to find places to submit it that I then found yourself,
Right.
in society, and every place else.
Well, so here's the thing. I started the Legion of Nothing in 2007, which is crazy to say at this point. Basically, right before Iron Man came out as a movie. So, here's the thing. My thought was this. I had run across several online serials, and one of them was by a guy by the name of Eric Burns. It was an online serial called Interviewing Levin. And Eric Burns is one of those guys who was writing superhero fiction online back in the days of Usenet. You know? I mean, if you can think of that. That's like the 90s. That is baby internet time. I mean, back when Jimmy Wales, as in founder of Wikipedia, was also writing superfiction as part of the same group.
Really?
Yes.
Nice.
So Eric, who actually I interviewed, by the way, on the Pen and Cape Society's podcast, along with Chris Wright, you should go listen to that now. No. Soon after this is done.
Yeah, forget this garbage podcast. Go listen to that.
But no, seriously, Eric's a great guy, and he wrote a thing called Interviewing Leather, in which was a novella basically, in which a kind of pseudo Rolling Stone-ish reporter goes and interviews a supervillain named Leather. It's one of those things that I loved, and honestly, and as a result of that, I thought, okay, writing superhero fiction online would be kind of cool. And the other thing that pushed me in the direction of superhero fiction was this. All right, there's nothing, or there wasn't at the time, in terms of superhero fiction, except for novelizations of Spider-Man films and Batman films from the Tim Burton Batman series, you know?
Yeah.
And as a result of that, I was like, okay, there's nothing out there. So what this means is, since traditional publishing companies will never publish superhero fiction, and it doesn't hurt me at all if I go and just publish it myself online, because it's got zero chance of publishing anyway. But here's the thing that I didn't foresee, which is a good thing actually, and that is Kindle and the rise of self-publishing. And so at that point, you end up going from, I'll publish superhero fiction on my website, to I will take the superhero fiction that was published on my website and I will turn it into actual books.
Genius.
And they will make money, unlike my website.
Boy, who would have thought of that? But let's get into Legion of Nothing. All right, you started in 2007. Yeah, I own the 2 books on Kindle.
Oh, cool.
And
Still working on the 3rd, unfortunately.
Yeah, I've tried to keep up online, but life, of course, gets in the way.
You know, that's one of those things I totally get, because, I mean, you know, I followed a lot of serials for years, but right now I'm not. And, I mean, I think there are various reasons for that. But, I mean, it is easy to have life get in the way. But yeah, Legion of Nothing, basically what it is.
Yeah, I'm about to ask, can you give a summary to the readers of what it is about the series?
Sure. The Legion of Nothing is about Nick Klein, who is the grandchild of a World War II era superhero. Funny thing about that, it's not just about him. It's also about the descendants of his grandfather's teammates. And basically my goal with Legion of Nothing is to just, I can't say use all the tropes, but it's kind of to use all the tropes that I like and care about. So, I mostly tell the story, but the thing is, I mean, the idea is to do kind of the comic that I wish could have been. And so I've always really liked Captain America. I've always liked Iron Man. I don't get to...
very, very quickly, excited for Avengers Endgame?
Yeah, well, very much so. I'm
3
looking
hours.
forward.
It'll be 3 hours long, man.
I just hope that's 3 hours of good.
It will.
I'm hopeful.
Infinity War was excellent, and I have faith that Endgame will be good.
Yeah, well, they're pretty much putting a capstone on the entire Marvel Marvel movie output so far.
Oh, yeah.
So it has to be. I hope.
It's probably not going to be like Hellboy, the latest one that came out this weekend.
I've heard bad reviews.
Yeah, it has like a 9% Rotten Tomatoes.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm probably going to see it tomorrow, but I'm like, jeez.
That's too bad.
Anyway, so, okay, you want to include all the tropes that you like into the series.
Right, well, I mean, basically, I really like kind of I like the kind of World War II era heroes. And I mean, that whole idea of having heroes in the past, and so I get to use that. And I also find it amusing to go and make up names from the kind of, that sound like the golden age of comics, which is really the full... I mean, people occasionally ask me, what does the title The Legion of Nothing mean? Well, okay, the Legion of Superheroes is owned by DC. But the sound of it, the sound of Legion of Superheroes is a very 50s sort of sound of the name. And also, the whole point of Legion of Nothing is not to be like this big rah-rah sort of hugely powerful superheroes, so much as being the story of a bunch of kids who are a little bit more certain and very well aware that they are kind of sticking their feet into the boots of legends. And I mean, of course, it's also about the fact that I occasionally tell stories of the original team, and they are, well, decent people. They're not like anyone is. They're not as perfect as you would get from what you hear about them 40, 50 years later.
Yeah, with the characters in this series, would you describe them as technically legacy characters since they took on the roles of their grandparents?
I mean, more or less. That's an oversimplification, but it is also pretty accurate to say it's basically the grandchildren of a 1940s era, 50s era superhero team reforming the team. Some of them using the identities of their grandparents, some of them using something new.
Like a variant of some sort.
Yeah, well, I mean, for example, one character, Marcus, is descended from more than one, shall we say, member of the original team. He is the product of the son and the daughter of two different heroes having a kid. And he doesn't have the powers of either superhero that he's descended from. He has kind of a bit of both.
Yeah, and how would you compare the Legion of Nothing to, like, other famous, teenager legacy groups, like, say, Teen Titans, Young Justice, or Young Avengers?
Yeah, well, I mean, the key difference in many cases is, like, those books, it's always the sidekick of the original hero that you're following in their own new adventures. Whereas these kids are all basically, the grandchildren, with one exception, of the original hero. And so they're, they knew their grandparents to a greater or lesser degree. But, as a child, and even as an adult, there's always a certain sense of mystery about your grandparents' life, I mean, you don't really know. And it was so different, 50, 60 years ago when they were alive and when they were your age, that you can only guess what that was like.
Yeah, so you don't have, like, characters where it's not like Batman constantly looking over Robin's shoulder.
No, this is more like if Batman's grandchild walked into the Justice League 50 years later, and or into the Batcave 50 years later, having been mentored to some degree by Bruce Wayne, presumably, and then
I was about to say Batman Beyond, but then I remember Terry's is technically his son.
Yeah. I mean, but then basically going like, what is all this stuff? Holy cow! Why does that even exist? What's this penny doing here? Why is there a giant penny? And or whatever, because basically, it's not all lost, but the main character does not know all the stories. His grandfather actually wrote down the various things, but he did it in the sort of style that a military unit would do it, which is to say, you write your after action report and you go on from there. I mean, which is to say, the stuff that he reads to find out about what happened to the Heroes League isn't a story. It's it's dry.
All right, so you've been writing Legion of Nothing for over a decade now, starting in 2007. Yeah, has the reception been in that time?
Well, kind of overall good. I mean, bearing in mind that I kind of expected to have no readers, I have more than that.
Yeah, you did mention that when I messaged you asking to be on this podcast. You're like, I didn't think anyone was paying attention.
Well,
wow.
I mean, the thing is, most days the site has about 2,000-3,000 page views. I mean, I know people are reading. Usually 200-300 people have gone to the site and read something. So, I mean, that's really cool. Given the difference in number of visitors versus number of pages, that means many of them are reading 10 pages or more at a time. So, for better or for worse. So that's cool. And I mean, to the degree that this matters, it's highly rated on webfictionguide.com, which is basically where you go if you want to find free serials, which I played a small part in founding.
Very nice.
So there's, it's just one of those things where people have liked it. And the reviews on Amazon are generally pretty good, with that one guy being an exception.
Yeah, how are the Kindle sales for the 2 books?
Well, here's how Kindle sales work. And that is, at least for me, you have this initial, peak every time when you release a book, and then it goes down until you release the next book.
Okay.
So since we're currently between books, they're not all that great. But the most recent book was, far in excess of the first one. And the thing is, when that second one came out, it very much pumped the first one's sales as well.
Okay, wait, are they available in print too off Amazon?
The first one is. The second one isn't. A few years ago, I did a Kickstarter, and I was going to do 2 books.
Patreon,
Yep.
which is still up, and you can donate there, folks. If
Yeah,
want
you
to.
can.
If you would be so kind.
But the thing is, the result of all that is that that I've basically been like, okay, I'm going to put out rewards when I finish the second book that's part of the Kickstarter, which is the 3rd book in the series overall. And bearing in mind that book was, what was it? Let's see, initially it was 240,000 words. And I divided it essentially into 2 books, the 2nd and 3rd book, which is good. Except here's the thing, I managed to get the first of those 2 down to 90,000, which was great. Good job on me. The second one, all right. I'm going to be happy if I get it down to 115,000 words. Your average novel is between 50 to 90,000 words. At about 90,000 words, you're talking about 400 pages. So, I mean, I'm not quite at the Drew Hayes doorstopper level for a hardback book, but it's bigger than I expected, and of course harder to edit, because here's what you got to do if you take a book, cut it in half, and make it 2 books. First of all, there's got to be a real climax at the beginning of the first book, because you
just can't put to be continued.
Right.
Right in the middle of the scene.
Right. But then, here's the awesome part. In the second book, you have to ask yourself the following question. All right, how long has it been since everyone's read the second book? The second book in the series, when you start writing the 3rd book, or rather rewriting it in this case. Well, the answer to that question is, it's been a year or 2. And they might choose to read the 1st and 2nd book again before reading the 3rd. But on the other hand, they might just decide, hey, I'm going to just start on the 3rd. I kind of remember everything. So that means you've got to reintroduce everybody. So that means that you've got to cut and reshape the earlier chapters. And, I mean, in my case, I sent it to a professional editor to have her go through and say, well, here's what someone would understand, and here's what they wouldn't, bearing in mind that, if they picked up this book cold. And so as a result of that, that is taking a lot longer than I intended or wanted, because I've got to go to a lot more work. And I mean, my thoughts are, hey, maybe I can get this down to 115,000, 120,000 words. But my in the course of doing this so far, I have added 7,000 or 6,000 to the book rather than cutting. I mean, I've cut stuff, no shortage of cutting, but the overall result of reshaping stuff is that you add stuff, at least if you're me. And so I'm not going to be too shocked to discover that the third one is on the bright side. If you go, money per, if you think in terms of amount you're going to pay for the number of words, it won't be that much more than the second book. But on the other hand, I dread the hardcover because I don't want to be the guy who's trying to sell a $20 hardcover. Or a $20 soft cover, but really thick.
Yeah, I have my own views on publishing itself. It's one reason why I sell my books so cheap, but yeah, please don't be the guy that sells $20 hardcover books. It's one of my personal pet peeves of the publishing industry.
I mean, and it wouldn't be my choice. I mean, I would want it to be as low as possible, but if you're using Amazon to do this, you're kind of stuck with how they, with what they say that the cost is per page.
Well, yeah, like I got about three novels published, 2 superhero, 1 literary. The literary one is about, I think, 20, maybe 30 pages longer than my 2 superhero ones. I'm selling that for $6 paperback.
Yeah,
whereas the other 2 are $5, which isn't that big, so I'm not worried about it. I'm like, wait, what's the difference?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I know for Amazon at least, it's all about how many pages it is, and it's all about binding, I'm sure, and what they have to do to make your book stay together, and the size of the book too.
Actually, when was the last time you really checked out Amazon, their publishing system?
I had to this year again, but I haven't had to publish something within the past year.
Oh boy, you were gonna have fun when you do publish this, since they switched over from CreateSpace to Kindle Direct Publishing.
Yeah.
Oh boy, my publisher and my editor Zach Elmblad and I have had many a fun time with my last book trying to figure out, because they have all these different things when it comes. What am I thinking? The word specifications when it comes to margins and whatnot.
Right.
It's like, what the hell? It was okay with CreateSpace. Why is it different now?
Well, the cool thing from my point of view is if push comes to shove and they want, and I decide, well, I'll just lay it out personally.
Yeah.
I can do that. I have before. I mean, I've done plenty of work in various different self-publishing programs, ranging from InDesign back to PageMaker. And
Smashwords, I believe you're on.
Well, no, I'm talking about Adobe programs.
Oh boy.
So, I mean, I am fully capable of doing the layout completely myself, and
I'm the writer guy that pays someone more experience. I mean, I've done layout and self-publishing before, mostly chapbooks and zines.
Yeah.
And I could definitely learn this now if I really put the time into it. But at this point in my life, especially with my day job, I'm a warehouse worker.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, Zach, can you please fix these margins? Here's $20.
No, that's understandable. That is understandable. I mean, there is always the question of how much do you want to spend your time? How much doing things that are not that interesting to you?
That's another good reason too, right there.
Right. And I mean, also to do the stuff that you're not that good at. I mean, for example, proofreading. I pay a proofreader. I also pay an overall editor. I'm fully capable of doing both of those things in theory. In practice, however, it's good to have another set of eyes. And it's also good to have someone who does it all the time, who will take possibly hours to do what I might do in days.
Yeah, I proofread my own stuff. Particularly because I have a journalism background, besides that, I've gotten better with that time. And again, I have that ever wonderful Zach Elmblad. He takes a look at it as he's editing, because of course he's going to read it.
Yeah, well, one would hope.
Yeah. God, I got a story about a guy who published one of my stories. Then he wanted to put it as part of like a program where like you could buy it online there. I'm like, oh sure, that's great, fine. Then he comes back, by the way, we're gonna have to do all this editing, we're gonna add all this stuff. He basically did like, you ever heard of the term live blogging, when like you're at an event and you're like logging what's going on? He basically did that to me, but with editing, and it came off with a condescending tone. Like, what is this? I don't like this. We need to take this out. I'm like, what are you going on about? Then he revealed, because I posted a story back in like 2014. I'm like, wait, you already published this. Why are you doing all this now? It's like, listen, man, I didn't really read it. I just kind of published it and you sent it to me. But now, if we want to make money off it, you have to do all this editing. And it made me mad enough that I told him to go fuck himself. And I have nothing to do with it now. He still sells it. He did his changes, but yeah, there's that cool story for you.
Yeah, see, I've had better experiences, but I've also had less of them with other people who publish my stuff.
Oh boy, I have too many stories, none of which involve superhero fiction. Yeah, it's one of the reasons why I self-publish these days.
Yeah.
Like, I'm still totally open to like other publishers and even getting an agent, but more these days it's like, no, I just want to self-publish my own stuff. I'm sick of putting up with this, and just like you with my Golden series, like I really have a hard time placing it, and even a hard time finding a publisher. And it's gotten to the point like, why am I wasting my time on this? I'm having more fun self-publishing it myself than pimping it out on my Facebook.
Yep. Well, and the funny thing is, of course, at this point, there are other people reading this, and you don't have to go, okay, where is this book going to fit in the bookstore for it to matter anymore? I mean, at one point, basically, you have the question of, well, okay, maybe a publisher buys your superhero novel. Are they going to put it in the science fiction fantasy section? That's probably the best shot.
Oh, yeah.
But beyond that, I mean, it's like, I don't know. It seems like many of the superhero fiction, some of the superhero fiction that I see is much like the supposed horror fiction that I sometimes see, actually a romance novel. And I'm not complaining. People who like romance novels get to read stuff too. It's just that, they're not going to be well served by putting those books into the science fiction section, where a bunch of people like me are going to go like, oh my gosh, this is not what I was looking for. But by contrast, I mean, I'm not going to be well served if I were, hypothetically speaking, to write something that is more gritty and kind of true crime than I currently do, and then they dump it into the science fiction section either. Because, I mean, that would appeal to a different group. I mean, there's a big overlap, but nonetheless, I mean, it's not the same thing. Whereas on Amazon, all I got to do is basically say, okay, true crime and superhero, and then it's in both places. And young adult, go for it.
Don't you get like 3 genre choices, I think?
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I usually put in superhero, science fiction, and pulp.
Yeah, that's not a bad idea.
Since I actually, with my books too, I also have a big affinity for pulp fiction. Specifically the superhero part of it. Since when I thought of pulp, it was always like sci-fi or detective. But then I discovered the superheroes, and wow, my 2 big favorites are the Spider and the Domino Lady.
Huh.
But yeah, that's a whole big subject. Wow. But
yeah. Well, I mean, the funny thing about this is that, I mean, comic books come straight out of pulp.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
some more than others.
Literally, Batman.
Yeah.
The first Batman story is a ripped-off story of The Shadow.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's like, narratively, it's the same story.
Well, yeah, a lot of pulp characters rip off the Shadow, at least at first.
Yeah.
Including the Spider.
Well, and the funny thing, of course, is that, that's back in the day where Batman carried a gun, which...
And he killed people, too, even without the gun.
Well, and that's kind of true of Superman too. Is the funny thing is like there's like some early comic of Superman where like he interrupts some guy beating on his wife and throws the guy out the window. I mean, that guy can't fly.
Yeah,
He's just killed somebody.
Yeah, well, one of my favorite real classic stories with Batman was when he faced off against Hugo Strange, I think, for the second time. Made it first. It's when he created his big monster men. And basically the comic was showing all these creative, brutal ways that Batman was killing these things. And one of them was like he basically lynched one with his bat plane, and like he carried it off through a field, and he literally just says, "It's better for him this way." And even worse is that he then bends over his plane with a pocket knife and cuts off the rope and just lets him drop to the field that he go fights Hugo Strange. It's like, I better do this before I face off Hugo Strange. I'm like, wow, nonchalant there, Batman. He's killing off monsters.
The thing is though that's very pulp hero, at the very least. It's very at least of a certain sort of pulp hero anyway.
Oh yeah. Let's get back to Legion of Nothing. Okay, we talked about reception of just general readership. How's your work been in the superhero fiction community?
Well, I mean, to the degree that people have read it, they seem to have liked it. I mean, it's one of those deals where, I don't know how well known I am, if at all. I mean, due to the fact that I'm part of Pen and Cape Society, I mean, a number of writers know me. And so as a result of that, certainly. But, I know that people have read stuff I've done. Every now and again, someone mentions that they liked it. Eric Burns, oddly enough, the person for whose work was a large part of inspiring me to actually do this, has apparently read some of Legion of Nothing and complimented me on it. So that was kind of a cool thing. That's just one of those. I mean, I know that people have read it and but beyond that, I don't know how far it goes.
Yeah. Any particular positive or negative feedback that has stuck out to you at all?
Well,
I say negative too because we were talking about the difference between fiction, prose, and comics. And in comics, you got an editor that can say, "Hey, change this up." But also in comics, you have readers that like to complain so much that sometimes it does indeed change the storyline in comics. Has that happened to you? Like someone just does not like something?
Well, okay. I mean, this is the internet. There's the. Did someone ever complain, and did they get really pissed? Yes, that did in fact happen. Did that result in me changing the storyline? No. In fact, at least in one case, relatively recently, I not only did not change it, but kind of doubled down. Because sometimes strong reactions in the negative kind of provoke people to, oh, really? You didn't like that? Well, this is going to get this is really going to piss you off.
Yeah. I personally only had one happen to me, and that was 2 months ago. And it really wasn't literary. I was doing a Facebook argument, which I get into one at least once a week, on a friend's page, and basically it was this dude who, you know what the term incel is, correct?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, basically this incel guy, he was arguing with my friend about something. I just posted 2 funny incel memes that apparently he didn't like. So he was losing to my friend, and he decided to try to hop in on me, I guess, deflect from the main argument.
Uh-huh.
First, he tried to get on my Facebook fan page. I just immediately blocked him. Then he brought it up in the thread. He started critiquing my first book, Godin, The Grey Wolf of Chicago, available on Amazon for Kindle. And it basically got down to, well, Garrett, let's look at the description of this book. He copies the description I have on Goodreads. This isn't looking good. How old are you? I got out of this back when I was 10. What are you, 30? I'm 31.
Oh, jeez.
And, I went off on a different subject I won't get into, but, yeah, I just totally did not acknowledge it.
That's generally the wise way to go.
But that's my big epic story of my one superhero fiction criticism right there. Some incel trying to belittle me.
Well, I mean, I don't know that I want to go into to some of this too deeply, but I mean, for example, I mean, I have had like, I post stuff in more than one place because I figure, I mean, it's essentially a marketing thing. I post Legion of Nothing on one website that is just all devoted to serials, in addition to my own website, and you do occasionally get that one guy who reads through the entire thing or a large part of it complaining the entire time. I'm like,
God!
Wow, how do you put 1,000 words of complaint after this thing? That post was only 800. I mean, it's one of those. Do you seriously expect I'm going to respond? And holy cow, you made 40 of these? You have a lot of time on your hands. Let me guess, you're 12.
And he pushes his glasses up and says, "Actually."
Yeah, that's just one of those things where, I mean, you shrug at that point. Though that said, there are occasionally situations where I go like, oh yeah, look at that Amazon review. Okay, he gives me a 4 or 5, and his entire review is complaining about the things that he didn't like. So I guess I'm glad he liked it, but I think that he needs to revisit what a review is.
I've only had one truly negative review so far in my career. That was on Goodreads of my first novel, Animaki, which is a literary book, literary fiction. It just said simply, one of the worst books I've ever read. Please don't buy it.
Okay.
Wow. And this is, ironically enough, my most acclaimed book so far.
Okay. I mean, that is one of those things where it's like, first of all, it always depends on what you think you're going to get out of the book as to what kind of review you're going to give it. Because, if the guy was actually looking for Pulp Fiction and he picked up your literary novel, he probably wasn't getting what he wanted.
Yeah, I actually do think I might know this guy because this is another dude I got into a big argument with a couple years back. And, but it's the same first name, so I'm not sure. But it coincidentally came about the time that I was arguing with him. So
yeah, that is a hazard.
You don't have to be Batman to figure this out. All right, I guess final thing about Legion of Nothing. All right, you've been going on it for over a decade now. Any idea how much longer you're going to do it?
Well, I have always kind of said to people there is an ending to this, and I'm not sure where it is exactly, but I feel like at the moment that we've passed the midpoint, and bearing in mind that we're 10 books in, that's a good thing. And I mean, to be honest, I'm also kind of, I still like it, but I am kind of ready to write other stuff too, And so I'm willing to bet that the online version probably is going to last for the equivalent of at least 2 more books, possibly 3, maybe, who knows, maybe even 4. But, I mean, we're 10 books in, so I feel like I can't say, I don't feel like anyone can say, oh man, you should have, gone for... you put too much. This is too short a period to spend with these characters. I mean, I'm hoping that people will feel that way, but I don't think that anyone can honestly say that I didn't put enough time into that universe if I end 12 or 14 books in.
Well, it's not like this is a Game of Thrones here.
No,
but I go in that deep.
Yeah, I mean, it's of course it's worth noting. His books, there are less of those books that. Though that said, mine are probably shorter.
I would hope so, because I honestly stay away from books that big because my attention span has gotten worse over the years, and it's got one reason why I write shorter books is like, oh, I could have made this point in this amount as opposed to this. Was this necessary? Holy shit, we do not need this subplot.
And that's a good thing. I mean, it is kind of nice to go and cut things out until it is only the thing that it was supposed to be.
Yeah.
That said, this is web serial fiction in my part that's being converted into ebooks and softcover books, and as a result, there's no way to avoid the fact that serial fiction, which is what this is, it sprawls. I mean, look at your typical Dickens novel. I mean, he was living in an age before people really went with. He was living in an age before the way the current publishing system works, and he was publishing thick books even then.
Oh yeah, him, Mark Twain did serialization. Dostoevsky did. Matter of fact, he did because he's paying off gambling debts.
Well, and
his was much more urgent.
And they were, in many cases, paid by the word, which I'm not, alas.
Yeah. Actually, this is a good segue because aside from superhero fiction, which also attracted me to your work, it's also because you serialize this stuff.
Yeah.
And with my own Golden series, it's about 2 books in it. The third one's going to come out either later this month or early May. It actually just got finished serialized in Schlock Webseed, one of my favorite places to publish. And that was one of my goals when I first started writing this series, was that since I'm inspired too by the old pulps, a lot of them were serialized and then put into book form.
Yeah, no, that's a cool thing.
Yeah, so I wanted to know, how did you get into serialized fiction? Like, what made you decide that you wanted to do this for your own work?
Well, I mean, it was actually Eric Burns, for example, and also an online serial called Tales of Emu. And actually, there were a bunch of serials that started right around 2006, 2007 online that basically made me go, okay, well, WordPress, this blogging platform, that could just as easily be used to serialize stories. And that's basically what I did. So...
Yeah, how many websites have you serialized on? Like, we know you have your own website, and you have, what's that website name?
The website name is inmydaydreams.com.
Oh yeah,
but that was back earlier on when I thought I was going to be posting multiple different things. I never really intended Legion of Nothing to go more than the original 8 posts that it was. It's just that people were reading, and I was like, well, I can continue this.
I got a good idea. That Holland novel you were writing?
Oh, yeah.
Serialize that.
It's tempting. I mean, the thing is, though, that's in like 2, 3, 4 drafts. And so I would have to pick which draft I was going to serialize, step 1. And then after that, I mean, honestly, I've always kind of thought of that as something that I wanted to take a shot at getting that thing published with a traditional publisher, just to do it. Because for better or for worse, it's kind of in that kind of midway area between literary fiction and science fiction.
Oh, okay.
And so I don't really feel like web serialization is like the ideal audience for that. So I'm going to at least take a shot at traditional publication for that one. However, that said, I am also at work at another completely different series that I probably will start serializing.
Oh, nice.
So my goal basically is to have like a good solid buffer of about an entire novel before I start serializing for that one.
Oh yeah, with my stories, I don't think I could do this with any of the websites I've submitted to, but they're all finished anyway. Like I could imagine doing like what you do and like write on like a weekly basis a new chapter. I've tried that before, like I think like back in high school. And back then and even now, it's like, oh god, I can't do this. I'm too slow of a writer, and this is too much pressure, and I just cannot take it. I'm gonna go watch Netflix.
See, that oddly enough for me, pressure is very centering, because I mean that the way I wrote most of my papers in college was like, okay, I've done all the work, but I've written nothing down, and the night before, I would basically go and write a 10, 15-page paper. But the key point is, I'd done all the research prior to that, so that was no big deal. And so for me, every Wednesday night and every Sunday night, I just go and write 800 to 1,000 words. Sometimes, when things flow really well, in many ways kind of unintentionally, I get more in the neighborhood of 1,500 words, but never less than 750. So, I mean, there are hazards to this.
Ups and downs.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, when you serialize a novel, and you're writing that novel chapter by chapter and posting it online, the parts that you would have, like maybe if you were writing them yourselves, you realize, oh man, I'm getting bogged down here, and I gotta just rework in my head the way I'm going to make this proceed. You don't have time to do that.
No.
What you have to do is say, well, this is where it is right now. I'm going to go get to the next bit, and I'm not going to worry about whether or not it's perfect. And in the end, after the complete first draft is finished, then I'm going to think about what I can cut. And that's, I mean, I'm okay with that, because here's the thing. As much as I've been a writer, I've been involved in playing role-playing games. And I'm almost never the player. I'm almost always the game master or dungeon master.
Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah, so Dungeons and Dragons, but also a game called Villains and Vigilantes, which was one of the first superhero games.
Oh, well, since you were born in 1969, were you playing back when they had, like, the big satanic panic over Dungeons and Dragons?
Oh, yeah, that was basically, it's like, I started playing Dungeons and Dragons in 1979 or 1980.
Well, and you also grew up in Holland, which, from my perspective, is very religiously conservative.
Yeah, it's kind of a weird thing, though. The Christian Reformed Church, which is the denomination I was raised in and I'm still a member of, is kind of like in this weird mid-space between wacky evangelical and like so far right that this, because some evangelicals are so far right and irrational that it's silly. But then on the other hand, they're in this weird mid-space between that and the mainline denominations, which are really liberal and really and really, in some cases, very weirdly rational about faith.
Well, sir, I was raised Catholic up
Okay.
in northern Michigan, Alpena, so yeah, I can understand the whole weird part.
Yeah.
And yeah, the curtains and it. Anyway.
But I mean, the thing is that for me, if you're playing Dungeons and Dragons or you're playing any of many different games, you as game master, there's no revision. It's all improvisation. It's like jazz. It's like playing music live.
Yeah, I've never played Dungeons and Dragons, but because I already have like the friend set for that anyway.
Right.
But as a dungeon master, you just cannot take back a command like, no, I changed my mind. You go riot.
Well, or better, or more to the point, it's like, okay, oh, so you guys chose to attack them that way, or alternately, you guys chose to try to trick them in such and so a way. And, well, sometimes, if you got the rules wrong, at that point I'm willing to go like, yeah, let's just change that. Yeah. But sometimes most of the time it's like, okay, we made a mistake. We're going to go forward anyway. Oh, and by the way, I forgot to tell you something I should have told you, but you know what? I'm going to sneak that in the next section.
Yeah, that was my perception of Dungeon Master, is that you could be a total dick if you really want to.
Oh, yeah.
Just be like, oh, by the way.
Well, but it's also kind of like, it's basically very much like being an author, except it's kind of a combination of being a writer and also being like the director of a small jazz ensemble, because you've got the rules and you try to improvise within them. I mean, your average jazz musician is typically playing the head, which is you play the tune straight. You do that at the beginning. Typically, you do that at the end. And then in the middle, what you usually end up doing is everyone takes a turn soloing over it. But the thing is, in the course of soloing over it, what you're paying attention to is the chord progression, so that you're playing notes that sound good, or if they sound bad, you're playing them to intentionally sound bad at that particular spot. I mean, it's actually a great technique to I mean, and commonly used. Dissonance is a thing, and if you know how to use it, you can do a really interesting solo. But the thing is that what you've done is you've known the rules for how you proceed, and you know you're going to make a mistake. It's inevitable you're going to make a mistake, but you keep on playing. And in terms of writing, if you're writing online and you're writing a chapter at a time, you just go forward. There is no choice.
All right. And when it comes to Legion of Nothing, how do you think it would have turned out if you didn't serialize it?
Well,
in an alternate universe where Jim did not serialize it, or serialization just did not exist.
Yeah, that's one of those things where I don't know what that would be like, because here's basically how this potentially could have worked, and in some ways more likely would have worked, and that is maybe I'd write the first novel, maybe I would then have the nerve to put it out on Amazon, except here's the thing, I would not have built up the readership of the serialized version, and the readership of the serialized version plays a very large role in the fact that when Legion of Nothing is selling well, that's why. Because what happens is, I say, hey guys, a new section of Legion of Nothing's coming out. I post it on the website, and there's this giant spike in sales. And that giant spike in sales has a side effect. The side effect is, the higher your novel is ranked on Amazon, the more visible it becomes. And as a result of it being more visible, people then who didn't hear about Legion of Nothing from my fans or from me see it in the... This has also been people who bought this book or bought stuff by this author also read stuff by this author, who happens to probably be a member of the Pen and Cape Society because we co-market. And as a result of that, suddenly more people are reading your stuff. I mean, so my bet is much less successful. So that's kind of a big piece of this.
All right. And you literally just mentioned when we were talking there that you have another series that you plan on doing soon?
Yeah, so here's this, oddly enough, goes right back to the role-playing games again. I mean, one of these things now, right now there's this big resurgence in Dungeons & Dragons. And I've actually played Dungeons & Dragons again since probably the first time since 1st edition D&D. They're now up to 5th edition. So, fine. And as a result of that, I became interested in, there's now multiple novels out there. It's practically a genre of its own, or a subgenre, really, of novels in which people are writing about, essentially, characters in a game. There's lit RPG, which is people writing about characters in a video game, which I just find interesting and kind of bizarre in its own way, but I can see how it would happen. But specifically writing about people getting stuck in the world of a Dungeons & Dragons game, or alternately, a novel in which you basically follow what does that world look like when the players aren't there. Literally, one of my friends, Drew Hayes, wrote a book called NPCs, in which it follows the non-player characters. The concept...
It's not the alt-right term that's going on
right.
to generate people.
No. This is NPCs as in non-player characters.
Oh, okay.
The ones that are played by the Dungeon Master. In his book, basically a bunch of non-player characters find that the player characters, the people played by people in this universe, have just died, and they take their stuff and go on their quest. And it's a fun book, and I very much recommend it, actually. In any case, what I have decided to do is I kind of decided, it would be fun to do something like that, and just write a book in which, in this case, the characters playing in a role-playing game realize have something happen and realize, oh crap, We are inhabiting the bodies of our characters in this world. And now what do we do? How do we get out of this? And that's book one, essentially. Because book two is, what happens after they get back.
All right. Wow. All right. Actually, let's get on to like the second to final subject. It's the Pen and Cape Society, which, to confirm, last time I checked on the website, i.e., like an hour before this interview, you are the president of.
Yeah, that's one of those weird things that happens when you have an all-volunteer society and you're volunteered. And everyone's like, yeah, that sounds good. And I'm like, I guess I could do that.
How did it start, the Pen and Cape Society?
Okay, well, now again we get back to Drew Hayes and other people. But Drew Hayes at one point had said, hey, we should do some cross-promotional stuff to a bunch of different superhero fiction writers. And eventually that came to include me because we just kind of grabbed at anyone who was doing that kind of thing and ended up with a group of some 20 people. Currently, the Facebook group, Pen and Cape Society, is more on the neighborhood of 100 people as opposed to the original 20. And what we try to do is make people aware of each other's books. And also we put out a yearly anthology.
The Good Fight anthology?
Yep, the Good Fight anthology series. And we're up to 5. 5 will be coming out one of these days real soon. Yeah. Like next month, probably.
That's published through, Local Hero Press?
Local Hero Press, run by Ian Healy, who is a member of Pen and Cape Society. He publishes not only himself, but also other authors. So it's small press. He's out in Denver, Colorado.
Yeah, he's going hard.
Oh, yeah.
When I checked him out in the past, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's got a lot going.
Yeah, he puts out multiple books a year. I'm kind of awed by his output.
Yeah, I put out about 2 golden books a year. One is like around now, the next will be fall before Christmas.
Yeah.
Even though recently since the books have become bigger and bigger subjects, bigger subplots, it might go down to once a year since I got other stuff I want to write about as well.
See, I know someone who writes romance novels. She wrote one romance novel a month for a while there.
You know Daniel Steele?
No, not exactly. but yeah. So here's the difference, though, is that that was all in indie stuff, and I don't think she does that anymore. In part because she currently is publishing traditionally. And her most recent novel, I'm talking about Cheyenne Young, her most recent novel is The Last Wish of Sasha Cade. I have no idea how well it's doing or anything like that. I just know that it's out and that she worked with the editor who edited The Hunger Games. So,
oh, really?
So her career is definitely moving ahead.
Shit, it's something.
Yeah, I mean, it's cool, though.
All right, and okay, so how many core members of the society are there besides yourself and Ian?
Oh man, well, I mean, probably in terms of like regularly active in the Facebook group, probably around 20. You know, that's. Yeah. But the thing is, there's more than that who contribute occasionally.
All right. So what would one have to do to become part of the society?
Well, mostly it's as simple as just going and requesting membership in the Facebook group, and then you're eligible potentially to be in the anthology. I mean, the thing is, though, it's worth noting that there's got to be some evidence that you've published superhero fiction. You know? I mean, because we kind of want to go like, okay, we're not going to be going, hey, yeah, we're going to totally let you in if you someday intend to publish superhero fiction.
I take it that this has been a problem.
No, not well. I mean, actually, people have applied, but yeah. But I mean, the thing is, we take people who have been like, well, yeah, I published lots of superhero fiction on my blog. I mean,
Yeah.
serialized fiction on your website, that counts perfectly well.
It's basically you gotta have something published in some way,
Right, you got to have some evidence that you give a damn.
not just a soon or maybe,
Right,
eventually.
right, yes. I mean, that's pretty much what it comes down to. It's not a matter of I've published traditionally with a big publishing house. There are people in Pen and Cape Society who have, but that's not a criteria for membership.
Okay, and you talked about this a little before, but what has the Pen and Cape Society's impact on the superhero fiction community been?
I am honestly not sure, except that I know that people find it when they try to find out about superhero fiction. And there are also now additional groups out there. So, some people I know for a fact actually, some people saw the membership requirement and were like, oh, I haven't published anything, and just joined another group. Which is fine. The thing is, I'm kind of loosely a member of some of those
Just
other
kind of
groups
shook
too.
his fist. I'll show you for rejecting me.
Not really. We really don't reject a whole lot of people. But the cool thing is, I'm a member of those other groups too, because push comes to shove. The whole idea here is superhero fiction as a whole thing needs to kind of get together and throw down the romance novels that dominate the superhero fiction category on Amazon.
Oh, wow.
Basically, if you go to the superhero fiction category on Amazon, the chance that you're going to see pictures of shirtless men who aren't even superheroes, it must be noted.
Or this, well, I guess I'll get into my whole thing about superhero fiction since I've been into it. It's not that big compared to other.
No, not at all.
And of course, my thing was like, yeah, good job, Garrett. Of course, you're going to get into a genre that barely has any knowability. And it's been rough for me personally trying to find places to submit because mostly I've submitted to Schlock Webzine, which is a science fiction, fantasy,
Right.
or they take anything. But a lot of them either don't accept it, or if there is superhero fiction, they're really not around. But coincidentally, their listings are still up. So, This Mutant Life, I think was called one of them. Yeah, I was like, oh, excited. Go around. Oh, we stopped publishing in 2016. And this was a very bad introduction for me. I couldn't believe I found this because when I was looking up, I found a place called, I think, superherofiction.com. The very first banner was this really shitty 3D banner of the two people that authored this page. It has the two characters thinking of getting into superhero fiction. Well, first advice, don't quit your day job.
Oh yeah.
And the second one was yeah, and if you don't think you have what it takes, don't even bother. I'm like, okay, hold up. As an indie writer, I've been writing, as I call it, professionally since 2006. Yeah, I do see where it comes being realistic, but come on, you don't have to crush ambitions here or being a dick about it.
Yeah. No, that's.
But basically, it's pretty hard to break out with superhero fiction, and compared to other communities like science fiction or, you ever heard of bizarro fiction?
Okay.
Yeah, it's not as active or even as big or as noticeable.
Yeah, well, it's one of those things where, again, the people I know in many cases are people who were in, who were on online web publishing. And as a result, what happens is that you end up having a group of people who like you, even though you haven't published anything on Amazon. And when you do, they want to go buy it.
Yeah.
And so, for example, Drew Hayes, who I've mentioned a couple different times now, what he did, he started writing superhero fiction, a series called Superpowered, initially on his website.
I think I may have heard that, actually.
Yeah, probably. Right on his website, and you can find it in Amazon now, but it wasn't initially. But the thing is, what he's done is he's turned it into a full-time writing career.
Lucky him.
And he's kind of, at this point, publishing indie and publishing kind of traditionally as well.
Does he work at all for like any of the big five publishers? As they call
I
them?
don't know. I mean, I don't think so. But the thing is, I know that he. Well, man, you're gonna have to look up his stuff. I don't remember all the stuff he's published. He puts out 3 books a year, typically.
Damn.
But again, he's full time, and so
Yeah, that's a good point, actually.
So basically, he does like 2 guaranteed from his point of view, which is 2 continuations of series that are already liked, and then he puts out a 3rd one that's basically, I guess I'd call it R&D, which is
all
to say
all under his own name, right?
all under his own name.
He didn't do like a Stephen King, Richard Bachman kind
Right.
of thing.
Well, I mean, the thing is, what you want if you're an indie writer, I mean, presumably you're pointing your stuff in the same community. You want everyone to know it's you, and everyone to go read all your stuff if possible. But he's got like 2-3 different series. He's got actually not 2 or 3, more like 4 or 5, and he's got Superpowers, which is basically kids. It's essentially superhero college if you wanted to go with a one line of explanation. There's also Villain's Code, which is basically a series about a group of supervillains who, basically kind of try to keep the supervillain community under control so that it doesn't do anything too outrageous that causes people to crack down on them. And in addition to that, he also does the NPCs series, which is about 4 or 5 books now. And I'm trying to think of what else he does. But I think there's a couple of series that I probably missed. Oh yeah, there's one that's basically kind of paranormal, kind of paranormal horror themed fantasy, which is basically the kind of a vampire series, which is kind of mocks the tropes of vampires.
Yeah.
Which is funny and good actually.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, Fred the Accountant. It's like something like Fred the Accountant Vampire or Fred the Vampire Accountant. I think that's probably it.
Yeah, I will say too with my forays into superhero fiction is that it's also been hard for me, and this is totally on me, is that as you just said, a lot of it is like romance. There's also a lot aimed towards like teens and kids, which isn't a problem at all. Hell, romance isn't a problem either. And this one actually more annoys me is where like they kind of get more literary with the superheroes. Like there's no action or anything, but it involves like their day or something, which is very annoying because my Golden series is very much pulp. There's action. There's lots of swearing. There's blood. There's sex. I mean, my character Godin is basically a gutter punk with werewolf-like powers.
Okay.
So yeah, I guess give your imagination there. Oh, I do have a gift for you afterwards. Okay. But yeah, that's kind of been hard too because it's not a big romance thing.
Right.
I mean, there's subplots and other stuff relating to the story, but compared to those, it is like a classic pulp book. There's like an enemy, there's something that's got to be stopped, day's got to be saved. And of course, at the moment, it's not for kids.
Yeah.
I have thought about doing I do plan on doing like a multiverse thing, which one of them includes basically codename right now, Teen Godin, where I do want to go into like more young adult fiction.
Right.
As like a little side project. That is an interest of mine, but yeah, that's been one struggle with me too, is just, well, depending on your interpretation, way too edgy.
Yeah, okay. I can see that. But I mean the thing is you market it toward pulp. And I mean there's a whole thing called the new pulp. That is like just a kind of literary movement.
Funny, in my notes, I was just about to ask that. You see the last thing, I was about to ask connections between superhero fiction / pulp / new pulp.
Yeah, well, that's what it is. I mean, basically, superhero fiction got its start in pulp and continues to be pulp. You know, I mean, and for that matter, actually, Van Ellen Plexico, a guy who's one of the people that gets pointed to pretty quickly when you start about talking about the new pulp new pulp literary movement. He's part of Pen and Cape Society. He writes superhero fiction in addition to
Nice.
pulp fiction. So, I interviewed him on Pen and Cape Society's podcast, for that matter. But it's all part of that same thing. It's all connected. Always has been.
Yeah. So right now, I guess, what's the current state of the Pen and Cape Society?
Well, it exists, and we're putting out a new anthology within the next month or so.
All right.
So
And,
people have written for it. Probably this is the first one, unfortunately, that I didn't get a story in on time. So this one will be without me being part of it, in large part due to that period this winter in which the power went out for most of the city, and I was like, oh crap, well I wanted to finish that short story this week, but it's hard when there's no power.
yeah. I'm very glad you survived that winter storm. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here on my podcast right now. That would make me very sad.
Yeah, it would make me sad too. I don't want to be an icicle.
All right. And so, where do you see the society going in the future? Like, any big changes or any big plans?
I have no idea. Basically, I have things that I want to try to have us do. I mean, honestly, I would love to see us do some sort of wild cards, like anthology / shared universe.
Oh yeah, I mean, you put out anthologies, you rep your own stuff, you had your own podcast.
Right. I mean, the podcast, unfortunately, has been on hiatus, in large part because the guy who was editing it kind of doesn't have time, which is understandable.
I could totally understand, because I try to have this be a monthly podcast, but unfortunately, that doesn't always happen, because my day job likes to have a thing called, quote-unquote, mandatory overtime. A lot of that sometimes happens Saturdays and Sundays.
Right.
So it's like, okay, I'm going to go Kalamazoo. Zach and I are going to do a podcast about conspiracy theories. It'll be fun. Friday morning, you have to work Saturday. Fuck.
Yeah, that's the nature of these things. Yeah.
Day jobs.
But, I mean, yeah, so, I mean, he doesn't really have time. I want to do a podcast again, but, for example, who'd be editing that sucker? Bad thought. Might be me. I don't really have time to do that in addition to other stuff, and so.
I guess it depends on like how high quality you want it to be.
That is true. I can handle really low quality. Guess what? This whole thing, we're not going to edit it at all. We're going to chop out. You know what I mean? It's that's basically how I would end up having to handle it. It's like we're going to chop out the beginning and the end where everyone says, "Hey, we're going to start," and I guess we're done, and we're just going to end.
Hey, brother, it works for me. This is like the 13th episode of this podcast. We're technically into season 2. I survived this long.
But I mean, that's one of those things where I think we ought to have a podcast again. Maybe I'll just do some series of me interviewing people. That could happen. I don't know.
I wanted to do a podcast for a while now, but it wasn't until last year, or no, not last year. Yeah, 2017 when Kevin Smith came to town. Along with Jason Hughes on their Jane Silent Bob Get Old tour.
I was there.
Oh, nice. Then you probably know what I talk about. Because among the shenanigans, they were talking about podcasting.
Right.
Kevin Smith, who was slightly fatter than he is now, he's really lost a lot of weight.
Well,
yeah,
heart attacks motivate you.
Yeah, and also getting booted off airplanes and complaining about it for months on end. But yeah, he took out his phone and he said, "You see this? If you have this, you can do your own podcast."
Yes.
And that was one of those, like, that's it moments.
Yep.
I actually did try to do stuff with a phone once, but it didn't. It recorded all right, but I had some trouble transferring, so it was like, okay, I'll go pick up a mic.
Yeah, editing on a phone is not ideal.
No, it's not really editing. It was just transferring the sound file onto my computer. And
Also could be a challenge.
Yeah, so I was like, all right. Final 2 questions then. All right, superhero fiction as a genre and a community. Where do you see it going in the near future?
Well, what I do know is this. There are more people writing it. than there used to be. And if there are more people writing it, there's at least that many more reading it. You know, I mean, it's one of those things where I don't know how big it'll grow. It may be that once this whole huge wave of superhero movies kind of ends, and maybe that superhero fiction will fade again. It might be, on the other hand, that like Westerns, it'll never quite fade. Because, you know, funny thing about Westerns, yeah, they had their heyday in Hollywood, but you walk into a bookstore, you're still going to find
there. No, I do like Westerns, so yeah, I know what you're talking about. I'm actually one of the few indie writers I'm friends with that actually likes Westerns. Everyone else just finds it annoying.
Again, I ended up going to Colorado an awful lot as a kid, so I can kind of imagine the West a lot easier than maybe a lot of people that you know.
All right, and bigger question. Wow, we could really go on with this, but how do you view the current comic books industry with the comics and movies and that? Yay or nay?
Kind of both. I mean, here's the thing. I am not currently following comics, but there are a lot of writers in comics whose stuff I really like. And I'm sure I probably will start regularly reading again. I mean, Brian Michael Bendis is at DC, and that means so there's undoubtedly some really cool stuff happening there at this point.
Yeah, I still follow Scott Snyder. He's my current favorite.
Yeah, Scott Snyder's amazing.
Yeah, the new 50, his new 52 Batman was incredible.
Yeah.
And I still follow Grant Morrison from time to time, but I think he repeats his concepts a little bit too much.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great writer, though, too.
Yeah, I kind of got out of Alan Moore there because I found him annoying, and he has a shitty attitude.
Well,
both of his own making and of the comic book industry.
Yes, that's true.
I completely got out of Frank Miller a while back.
Well, like many people, unfortunately, I mean, for me, I loved Frank Miller's Batman miniseries when it came out, and I still like it a lot. I've got a copy. But the thing is, like, yeah, some of his stuff at this point is like, okay, did there need to be a sequel? No, there did not.
He's just not that good of a writer, and that's probably due to his age and own health.
Yeah, well, that probably doesn't help.
The only comic book writer that I can say that I just absolutely despise, and don't worry, I'm not gonna hate you if you like him. Mark Millar.
Oh, okay. I don't have any huge opinions about him, actually, because I mean, I occasionally have liked stuff that he's written.
Oh, I have too. Like Red Sun, Superman, Red Sun.
Oh yeah, that was great, actually. Yeah, I'm trying to remember who it wasn't him who wrote. Was it him? No, it wasn't him who wrote The Boys. But
wait, what is it?
The Boys. I don't know if you've ever read that. It may be Garth Ennis who wrote The Boys.
I know Garth Ennis through his Punisher series.
Yeah, well, see, I know of Garth Ennis' stuff basically due to Constantine, due to Hellblazer, which I really liked a lot. But yeah, The Boys actually is a great comic that in which basically all superheroes are complete jerks. That's the gist of it.
Oh god.
And then
it's kind of the same thing with Mark Millar.
Yeah.
I forgot who said it, but it was like his co-creator, since they kind of started the Ultimate Marvelverse.
Okay.
His co-creator was saying, like, the difference between him and Mark Millar is that Mark Millar is very nihilistic, there's no hope, whereas he, like, injects more hope and heroics into his stuff. That's kind of one distinction with my own series, as violent and as explicit as can be. Yeah, I do have that, but I just don't want to be, like, nihilistic and violent hopelessness as I see with Mark Millar.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I prefer hopeful fiction. And that's one of those things where, I mean, the Dark Age of comics is one of those things I don't really have any attachment to at all, though there are some books that I probably have enjoyed from that period. But, I mean, you know, like the comic industry at the moment, there are things that I really like. For example, the fact that it isn't in the 90s dark era of stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, if you take a look at the movies, I mean, the movies have been great. They've mostly portrayed characters as I like. And again, I'm talking mostly about Marvel stuff. Once I start talking about the DC movies,
I actually would, as a DC fanboy, I would actually agree with you on a lot of stuff. And Like, and they actually, DC has finally learned that, and they're getting better.
Well, see, what I kind of suspect went on in DC is this. They probably said, okay, Superman Returns did not do great business. And they said, hey, look, you know what? This Batman series by Christopher Nolan, that did great business.
Yeah, it did.
So when we do Superman, why don't we have someone do Superman? Oh, and so did Watchmen. Watchmen did pretty well, too. And when we do Superman...
Unlike a lot of people, I actually enjoyed the comic adaptation as well as the comic.
We're right.
I do think their soundtrack choices on that was shitty, though. Like My Chemical Romance covering Bob Dylan's Desolation Row.
That's an interesting combination.
That was awful.
But I mean, I enjoyed Watchmen. But here's the thing. They then said, okay, well, let's have Zack Snyder, the guy who did Watchmen really well, do Superman. Then I go to myself and go like, okay, personally, I have to admit, I've enjoyed, while I was watching them, all of the DC films. It's worth noting, however, that as I walk out, I say to myself, I enjoyed that Superman, but not as Superman. I enjoyed that as a take on Superman. That's not the version of Superman that I would prefer to see.
Oh, yeah.
It had moments of the Superman that I want to see.
Yeah, a lot of viewers do that. They view it like, this isn't like the comics. I'm like, of course it's not. It's an alternative universe.
Right.
Normie.
Right. Well, that's true. But yeah, my attitude is I liked it as a take on it. But the thing is, it wasn't the version of Superman that I feel like ought to be the version of Superman.
Yeah.
And at the very same time, the key point from my point of view is Superman is not Batman. Superman is inherently a hopeful character. And my problem with kind of DC Universe as it was under Zack Snyder was that basically that was just way too dark.
Yeah, with Zack Snyder, I liked his visuals because they wanted to separate themselves from Marvel and a little bit darker, a little more surreal, which I do like. But as a writer, he's awful. Like, he's not Mark Millar awful, but he's bad. Like, I read up an interview, and as I mentioned before, ladies and gentlemen, we're at the Hall Street Cafe here, and as you may not know, in previous podcasts, I have not been as explicit in language or jokes as I usually am, but basically, Zack Snyder, his vision of Batman, which I like Ben Affleck's version, by the way.
Yeah, so do I.
But basically, his version of Batman was like, this Batman would get raped in prison. I'm like, what the fuck?
Yeah, no, I mean, I read that. I read that him say something along those lines, and I was like, yeah, see, that's not what I want.
Yeah, so basically, DC got him off that, and they're still keeping like the visual style, which is great, but now they're leaning on better writers, and then you get like Shazam recently, which is getting all the acclaim it deserves.
Right.
It's got Wonder Woman, which is up there with Shazam as the best. Even Aquaman, which isn't as good as Zoetewey, but it's still a good film.
But the key point for all of these is that there's hope in these movies, and it's not as dark in feeling.
Yeah, exactly. You can be dark in visual, but in feeling and overall, you gotta have something, I think.
Well, and especially the DC characters. They're not. I mean, the whole thing with the DC characters is that, by comparison to Marvel, where you're really going with kind of everyman and superhero, what you're going with DC characters is kind of like better than human as superhero. Because, Superman, he is the best human for all practical purposes.
Well, yeah, if in comics at least, not counting like total god characters, in everyone, whether it's DC, Marvel, Image, whatever, he is probably the strongest superhero bar none.
Right. Yeah. Well, and for that matter, though, again, Batman is like the world's greatest detective. I mean, the key point is he's not a normal guy. There is nothing about this man. I mean, he doesn't have any powers, but he is not a normal human being.
Let's not get into that debate of whether he's technically a superhero.
Oh, I'm not gonna argue that one way or the other. But the point is that the Batman can go toe to toe with Darkseid. That's not.
Oh yeah.
That's not the act of your average guy. That's kind of the difference between DC and Marvel at core, I would argue. And when you then do a dark sort of version of these sort of characters, go like, I end up going like, well, okay, you can do that. That's cool, and I'll probably enjoy what you do with it. But in the end, it's not the version that's going to stick because the feel of the characters doesn't really allow that. You know?
Oh yeah, they're just not stickable people. Or at least they're not characters that you really want to attach yourself to.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I just
or relate in a sense.
Yeah, well, in that sense. But I mean, the thing with Superman is that kind of I don't think got used well enough in the DC films. For example, is the part with Superman is the part where you relate to the guy is Superman as Clark Kent, because as Clark Kent, unlike him as Superman, he's not invulnerable. Clark Kent can get his feelings hurt. Clark Kent can get rejected.
Oh yeah.
I mean, his job can go badly. He can get fired. They didn't really use that in the movies because what the vision was basically, well, let's make them like the Dark Knight. And Batman, oddly enough, Bruce Wayne, is, for all practical purposes, invulnerable in his personal life.
Oh yeah.
I mean, by comparison to
also the
Clark
Ben
Kent.
Affleck one, he's also apparently a raging alcoholic who stamps prisoners with his bat thing, where they then go on and get killed in prison.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's one of those things where I honestly enjoyed his portrayal of the character. But, I mean, a lot of the stuff associated with that portrayal, I just go like, that is unnecessary.
Yeah.
But, at the very same time, I enjoyed the movie. You know, they weren't terrible movies.
Well, Batman v Superman was terrible. my thing was with that isn't really the characters, or it's basically, okay, we were talking about subplots. It went from subplot to subplot so much that you really couldn't connect to it. Like, 1 minute it's Batman researching this, next it's Superman looking for that, then there's Lois Lane doing this, then there's Lex Luthor urinating in a jar.
Yeah, no, I mean,
it's like, what is going on here? How does it connect?
Yeah, well, I mean, that movie was messed up.
It was
in a number of ways, as was unfortunately Justice League, its sequel.
The Justice League was way better, but they should. They messed up Steppenwolf. They could have done better with him. Visually, he looks nothing like he does in the comics.
Yeah.
And, they could have done it way better, I think.
I mean, from my point of view, basically, the thing that makes superhero movies work when they work, oddly enough, is having the core character, the core appeal of the character surviving from the comic to the movie. You know, with Deadpool was great, but you'll note with Deadpool that he was exactly like Deadpool.
Oh yeah, Ryan Reynolds is masterful. Masterful in the 2 films. X-Men Origins Wolverine.
He had no control over that. That's one of those things where it's like, yes, when Hollywood gets a hold of certain characters, they don't get it. And this was
I have my whole complaints about the X-Men series as a whole, but wow.
But yeah,
I actually do think the Wolverine was the worst movie in the X-Men Origins Wolverine. That's only because the Wolverine I thought was boring in comparison. At least Origins had like a bad entertainment value to it. But yeah, I think that's a good way to stop off there. It's an hour and 46 minutes.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, Jim. Anything you would like to plug? Any upcoming projects?
The Pen and Cape Society's 5th Good Fight is coming out, I believe, in a week or so from the point where we record this, which means by the time you hear it, it will undoubtedly be out. So the Good Fight 5, and that one is Golden Age, or I believe it's Golden Age, where basically we have Golden Age superheroes or superheroes from who are living in that era just go and do what they do, which is basically probably the closest we've done to a total Pulp Fiction anthology. But it's not really Pulp Fiction. It's Golden Age superhero stuff. At least trying to match that feel, or at least in that period. So that's worth looking for. I'd love to plug my 3rd novel. Unfortunately, I'm still editing that sucker. and trying to make it shorter even as it grows longer.
Well, guess what? You just plugged it out. Okay, but what's your official website again?
Well, you can get to it, and this is how you'll probably best remember it, legionofnothing.com.
Well, not only can they remember it, but I will be putting this down in the description, folks. You can check that all out. And along with the Pen and Cape Society. Anything else?
That's pretty much it.
All right, I think it's a good time to end it. All right, everyone, thanks for listening. And thank you, Jim, for being on, man. This was a great conversation.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yep, and thanks for suggesting this location, too, because, well, quickly, folks, I have an office, like I said, I go to, and a library I go to. This time around, I tried to find the same thing, but everyone everywhere wants to charge you. Until finally, I just contacted Jim here. I was like, God, can you please suggest a place? Because I can't figure one out.
Yep.
Yeah, I actually plan on coming here again with other guests I plan on having.
Yeah, choosing the time when it's not real busy is a good choice, however.
Yeah, it's a pretty good time, actually. All right, and folks, you can find me at my official website, GarretSchuelke.tumblr.com. I'm back on Twitter more, so posting at least once a day at Garret Schuelke, all one word. If you're listening to this on the Internet Archive, you can stream it on YouTube. If you're listening on YouTube, you can download this off the Internet Archive. And hopefully soon I'll have it on some other services like Podbean, if they don't charge me anything, because I am poor. Oh, and for a promo of my own book, Godin, Queen of the Third Coast, I believe it ended serializing Schlock webzine this week, which means, well, depending on when the guy who does cover illustrations gets done, it'll either be out at the end of this month or beginning of May, so look for that, folks. All right, I guess we'll peace out. Thank you, Jim, for being on. And thanks, everyone, for listening. Have a good day. What does Stanley used to say? Excelsior, something like that?
Yes, which actually means something about wood chips or something. I mean,
rest in peace, Stan.
But anyway, he was awesome anyway.
Yep. Well, see you later, folks. Here's the outro song.
Wanted a chance to try and show you everything you deserved, well, that I owed you, but you were too scared to try. You're content with just getting by. All these creature comforts won't cut it anymore. And I was just so used to you sinking into the floor. These creature comforts won't cut it anymore. And I was just so used to you sinking into the floor. Memories of those nights we spent in silence, passing headlights on dark roads remind us. Every night I searched for light, but you've already thrown this by. All these creature comforts won't cut it anymore. And I was just so used to you sinking into the floor. These creature comforts won't cut it anymore. And
And I was just so used to you sinking into the floor. So it turns out everything wasn't picture perfect, but I didn't care, 'cause I thought you were worth it. But it turns out you couldn't be bothered. So I'm just sitting at the top of your stairs. They lead down to your bedroom, and I wish I was there. Yeah, I wish I was there. Whoa, whoa,